So I just wanted to say thank you. There's a picture of a group of students on a Friday night. I think it might be the next slide. I want to thank this church for over 20 years. You have been part of what we've been able to do in reaching out on the campuses here. So that's our family room. Every Friday we have a bunch of people over for dinner, and a lot of you have helped provide those dinners. There's over 100,000 students in the St. Louis area. We're on 2 campuses now. We're on the Med campus now. There's about a dozen campuses. So there, in the front of your bulletin, there are 3 prayers that, as the campus ministry team, we would ask you to pray this year. And I won't go over those prayers, but if you will look at those and pray for those 3 things, I think God would, if he would honor those 3 things, then it would be an amazing, amazing year. If you have any questions about campus ministry, John Cole, you're over there, there's John, Brett Blackford, and Lane Ham are all part of the campus ministry committee. So talk to them or one of the elders or myself if you have any questions about anything. Okay, so I had a dream last night. I'm serious. And in the dream, I had thrown my back out. And that's actually true. I got a few ibuprofen in me right now. So I'm not going to tell you the whole dream, but if you want to hear the whole dream, it's really kind of comical. But, so in the dream, I was late getting here, and I was supposed to bring the message, and I was wearing a hoodie, a Webster Groves hoodie. I don't know why. And it was dirty. I was like, that's fine. I got a shirt underneath. I took that off, and my shirt had powder stains all over it. I don't use powder, so I don't know where that came from. But I couldn't get them out, so I had put the hoodie back on with my dress pants. Well, I lost my Bible, and then some people helped me, and I found the Bible. Well, by the time all this happened, it was really late getting started, so the sound team played a commercial. So everybody's watching a commercial when I went up front. There were a lot of other things that happened, but one of the questions that I'm about to ask is, what is it that you don't like to wait for? And in my dream, I asked this question, and Collins Corder, he's in the auditorium right now, stood up and said, I don't like to wait for water, because if you go more than 3 days without water, you could die. So the tweak in the back is real. I hope none of the other stuff happens. So what is it that you don't like to wait for other than water after a few days? My guess is that things popped in your head as soon as I said that. Waiting in line to go to the bathroom. That's definitely one, right? A paycheck, waiting for your paycheck. Anybody kind of waiting? How about a phone call when you're trying to get, you get your bills wrong, and you get that music going, right? And then they transfer you to one person, and they transfer you to another person, and then it hangs up on you. Doctor's office. How about medical tests? Waiting for a medical test to get back. There's a lot of things that we wait for. There's a picture, if you'll put, there we go. Anybody as a kid can't wait to open your presents, try to sneak? A lot of the things that we wait for are just inconveniences. Sometimes they're serious. Probably the hardest thing I ever had to wait for was to find out whether Susan and I were going to be able to carry a baby full term. We had multiple miscarriages, and boy, man, you can pray and you can trust God, but waiting for that to find out, is this going to be able to happen or not, was very difficult. Well, there are a few things that we actually may like to wait for, right? So what if you got this deadline It's really pressing up against you, and they extend it. That's nice to wait for that one, right? I was not looking forward to that deadline. Good food. A lot of times we're more than willing to wait an hour for good food as opposed to going to another restaurant. How about getting old and weak? There we go. I'm sort of feeling that way right now with the old back going on. I don't hear too many people say, I cannot wait until I can barely run anymore. But to be honest, for the most part, we don't like to wait on a lot of things. And we live in an age, we live in a society now that expectations are very high to deliver quickly. But what about waiting on God? What about waiting on God? Is it the same? Do we have the same frustration, the same impatience waiting on God as we do everything else? Well, I believe there's a significant difference, and that's, I hope, in this short time, that can help us all see. If there's a difference when it comes to waiting on God. And if we can believe that, if we can live in that, I think it'll change a lot of things for us. Because when we're waiting on God, He's actually on the move. He's actually on the move. It may not seem that way. It may not seem like He's even around. But He is on the move. So we can have joy in waiting on God. I believe we can have joy in actually waiting. That we can have comfort in waiting on God, and that we can have peace in waiting on God. And I hope that we can see that with God, the best way to our desired destination is waiting on Him. And wow, what peace we could have if we could live in that way. So in the psalm that was read, okay, wait, before I go there, I want you to imagine with me, all right? I want you to kind of just imagine. Let me see, who is it? Jeff Earnhardt. Okay, I'm going to use you in this example, right? He's like, oh boy, here we go. So I want you to imagine that it is your first time in St. Louis. You just arrived, you've never been here, you know nothing about it, but you know Jeff Earnhardt. But right now, you're sitting in the front of the church building in your car because your GPS stopped working, you don't have a map, and you lost your directions, and you're about to go to one of the most important meetings that you've ever had, and it's across town, and you have no idea how to get there. And in your head, I don't know if there's a slide on this, but there you go. In your head, that's what the roads look like all around you. But you see Jeff. He's walking across the parking lot, and you tell him your situation. And Jeff says, no problem, I got you. I know exactly where that is. I grew up, I've been around in St. Louis a long time. I know the roads here. We're going to have to wind around a little bit to get there on time, but my car's right here. Follow me. I'll get you there. So what would you do? You're going to follow Jeff, right? He's your best shot. And when you follow him, you're going to follow him. You're going to look at that car ahead, and when he puts his left, we've done this, right? When he puts his left blinker on, we put our left blinker on. If a car tries to get in between us, we're like, no. Right? If he takes a left, we take a left. If he takes a right, we take a right. Every move, we wait, and then the next move, we follow. We wait, we follow. We wait, we follow. Because we don't know where we're going. We don't know how to get there. We know where we want to go. We just don't know how to get there. And we really want to get to our desired destination. What if Jeff turns down a street and there's a lot of traffic? Or what if the speed limit is 45 and he's going 40? He slows down. What are we going to do then? Well, we can just keep trusting him, follow him. What if he takes a left and you're like, we keep taking lefts and I'm pretty sure it's over to the right? we can do a couple things. One, we can just pass him. Jeff, man, why did I follow you? I'm just going to go it on my own. I'm not going to follow you. You don't know where you're going. That would be foolish, wouldn't it? We started this whole thing not knowing how to get there. So all of a sudden, now we're going to doubt that Jeff's going to be able to get us there, so we're just going to go on our own. Here's another thing we could do, and this is something I think most of us do often. We could complain. Gah, Jeff, it's 45. Why are you going 40? Why did you turn down this street? That was dumb. This isn't going to get us there. We're going the wrong way. This is an important meeting. I got to be there. What does that get us? It gets us a miserable journey. Whether we get there on time or not, we're miserable. But what if we could just completely trust that Jeff really did know his way around, and that he was zigzagging around and taking lefts when we think rights because he had a plan, and he knew how to get us there on time? I think we'd be happy to wait for his next move. So my point with this, where I'm trying to go with this, is what if God is driving the car ahead of us in every single area of our life? In every area of our life, he's driving the car ahead of us. Wouldn't we be comfortable waiting on God? Because he's going to get us to our desired destination. And even though we might doubt, if we trust that he's the one that can get us there, we can take joy in waiting. In that Psalm, chapter 62, verse 1, David says, "For God alone my soul waits in silence. From him comes my salvation." And if you have the NIV, it might say rest, and rest actually in the translation means silent waiting. So for God alone my soul waits in silence. From him comes my salvation. And the word alone in the Hebrew is emphatic. And what that means is it's expressing something very forcibly and very clear. That word alone. That word is also in the Hebrew restrictive, meaning it has very specific limitations. So David is only waiting on God. God alone is he waiting on. And like Jeff going through the city, we wait for his next move only. Now, as we go down through the psalm, David starts coming across some persecution and some troubles and some injustices. And maybe the reason we hate waiting, or we have a hard time waiting, is because we've experienced these things in our life. And that's why it's important, I think, that we recognize the difference between waiting on God and waiting on other people, maybe even waiting on ourselves. It's not ourselves, it's not humanity that we wait on to make things right. And I think too often in our world, that's what we expect. We expect someone, something to make it right. And it's kind of in our nature, right? But in Romans it says, no, none is righteous, no, not one. But it's in our nature. It's in our nature to not want to wait and to not trust. We want to reason through things. Why is this happening? Has anybody ever asked that question? Why is this not happening? Is somebody going to do something about this? Is somebody going to fix this? I'm going to have to just take control. I'm going to have to pass and get this done myself. There's got to be a quicker way. There's got to be an easier path. Well, we're not perfect in patience. At least I'm not. If there's somebody out there that's perfect in patience, you can talk next week. I'm sure Jeff would be glad to pass that up. The good thing about following God is when we're not perfect in patience, okay, so I'm following Jeff, and hopefully Jeff would do this for me, because it's like the most important meeting, Jeff, I've ever had to go to. I got to get there, but I'm like so impatient, I'm so anxious that he takes a left and I take a right. Hopefully he's going to come back and find me. And God does that for us. Now, that might make us late, or we might get ourselves in some trouble in doing that. But God will turn and seek us out again. Do you think Abraham and Sarah had trouble waiting? If you don't know this story, it's in Genesis chapter 12. It's where it starts. It starts off awesome. God tells Abraham that he will make from him a great nation. He says, from your seed will come as many stars are in the sky. That's how many people will come from you. That's pretty cool. But Sarah was barren. And they were old. But they waited. They waited on God until about chapter 15 of Genesis. And then Abraham says, O Lord God, what will you give me? For I continue childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. So Abram's saying, okay, God, it's been a while. Nothing is happening. Eliezer. Is that it? Is that the heir? And this is what God says. This man shall not be your heir. Your very own son shall be your heir. Don't you love all the explanation there God gives? He just says, nope, it's not Eliezer. But you know what I love about this? Abraham asked. It's okay for us to ask. Because in waiting, a lot of times for me, I'm like, am I really waiting or am I just paralyzed? Because I'm afraid to make a move. And so we have to ask. If you ever heard of my conversion story, I didn't just ask, I screamed and yelled at God. And he answered, not the way I was actually hoping for. Yeah, actually the way I was hoping for. But the way I had to get there to the route, I was taking a left when I thought it should be a right. But ask. So they waited. Okay, it's not Eliezer. Then chapter 16. Then Sarah gets a great idea. I know how this is going to work. She says to Abram, behold, now the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go unto my servant. It may be that I shall obtain children by her. And Abram listened to the voice of Sarah. And Ishmael was born of Hagar. Okay, so this just blew my theory, right? Just go on past God. Why wait? Sometimes you just got to get out there and do it yourself. Look at Abraham and Sarah. They did it. They had a child. That was not the child. And if you know the story, this became quite a mess in the family. It had repercussions way down the line. So that wasn't it. So they waited. They waited. And then Genesis 21. Abraham was 100 years old. How many 100-year-olds do we have in the audience? None. No, well, yeah, you're not 100. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. And this is what I love. There's other things said, but I love what Sarah says. She said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. Who would have said that? Anybody got the answer? God, and God alone. He did say it. And he alone said it. I doubt very much that when Abraham went to his friends at 100 years old and said, guess what? Sarah and I are going to have thousands of kids. That there were too many people that said, awesome. That's cool. Well, I think we can empathize with them and with their impatience. It was a long time waiting. A long time waiting. And it didn't even seem possible. So it's not even just the waiting, it's the impossibility in their mind of what was going on there. But God is trustworthy. He is worthy of waiting. In verse 5 of that Psalm 62, It says, "For God alone, O my soul, wait in silence, for my hope is from him." Now this is almost identical to verse 1, except that big O. And I think what's happening here is in this first verse, that's the state of David's soul. That's where he is. He is saying, God alone, my soul waits in silence, from him comes my salvation. And we could all say that right now. Amen, AJ. We're going to wait on God. I'm with you on that. We can do it. Well, then some things happen, right? Some things happen, and that's what David, some things happen. He feels like he's being attacked. Injustices happen. Life starts happening. And so then he says, then the psalm says, "For God alone, oh, my soul, wait in silence." And so I think what David was doing was reminding himself. He was telling his soul, whew, okay, I believe this. I believe I can have joy in waiting on God, but life sucks right now, and it's been sucking for a while. Can I say that? So I'm going to have to tell my soul, be patient. What I believed, I need to still believe. God will come through. I'm hurting right now. I am hurting. I feel alone, but I'm not. I trust you. If we're going to buy into waiting on God, we need to continue to remind ourselves of his goodness. We need to pour into his word. You know, sometimes like, need to read my Bible. It's not need, it's hunger for what it's going to get us to. Pray, meditate, remember his faithfulness. And in this psalm, I just pulled out, mainly from verses 6 through 8, some words about what it led to, waiting on God. Salvation, glory, a rock, strength, refuge. These are just a few things. Waiting on God is good. Waiting on God is good. Well, maybe you're skeptical. Let me throw out some things that can make you skeptical about this. You're coming from an extremely dysfunctional family. Nobody in this group has a dysfunctional family, so you probably don't understand that, right? Well, it's funny how many people are smiling now. Maybe you're coming from an extremely dysfunctional family. Maybe someone sold you out. Maybe others are jealous or hate you because of your giftedness. Maybe you've been lied to, deceived, wrongly accused. Maybe somebody here has actually even been thrown in jail, and you didn't deserve it. Suffered injustice. Maybe you've helped people over and over again, and then when you needed help, you were forgotten. If any of those happen to you, you're not alone, because I just listed off everything that happened to Joseph. At the age of 17, God reveals to Joseph in a dream that he will be in a high and powerful position. Can you imagine this as a 17-year-old? God reveals to you, there's some great things going to happen through you. Woo! Let's go! So then what happens? Not too long after, he's sold into slavery by his brothers. It's like, what? This is not a high position. It can be easy to start doubting God really quick when things don't happen in the time frame that we think they should. So over the next 10 to 15 years, here's what happened to Joseph. He was rejected by his brothers. They hated him for his vision, the vision that God had given him. They sold him into slavery. Potiphar's wife tried to seduce him, and when he fled, she said he tried to rape her. So he gets thrown in jail. He gets thrown in jail, and the cupbearer, he tells him how he's going to get out of jail. And the cupbearer says, I'll put in a word for the king for you. Awesome, great. Cupbearer forgets about him. So after all that, Joseph is bitter, and he's angry. No, he's not. I think, unfortunately, would be hard for me not to be bitter and angry if all those things happened to me, especially when at 17, God said, there's going to be great things happening through you, big guy. No, he wasn't bitter and angry. Matter of fact, I think Joseph got this. He believed and he thrived in the waiting. In the midst of the chaos and the troubles, he thrived. And after 13 years, 14 years, 15 years, I don't know the exact date, guess what happens? He becomes powerful. And he saves thousands and thousands of lives because God reveals to him how to have food so everyone doesn't starve. And then those brothers, those nasty brothers, this is where it gets his retribution, right? I'll show them. You wait on God, then you get powerful, then you attack your enemies, even if they're your family. Nope. He says to them, as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones. Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Wow. Joseph endured because he believed in God and he waited on God. He didn't just wait, he thrived in the waiting. He took the opportunities presented to him. How many times do you take the opportunities presented to you when you're waiting on God and you're in a boring place or you're in a difficult place? It's hard for me to do that. I'm just like, okay, I really did throw my back out, so I'm kind of hurting right now. And when that happens, I can't wait for about 3 days to pass because then I know that's usually when it gets better, about the third day or fourth day. But can we thrive in those moments? I remember once this happened and I was on my back and I couldn't move. And I was asking God, why does this keep happening? And a co-coach, I was coaching baseball then, called me up and he said, can I come over and talk? And he came over and he admitted to me that he was an alcoholic and he needed help. And I counseled him for about an hour and a half, laying on my bed, asking him to get me a drink of water because I couldn't reach over and get it. And I just praised God when he left because it reminded me that waiting on God sometimes are the times when we learn so much from him. All right, so he took the opportunities. He let God be the lead car. So 3 things I want us to leave with, and there's already 2 up. That must mean I'm going long here. 1 is ask God. Asking. Remember Abraham asking. Don't be afraid to ask God when we're waiting and we're impatient or we're not sure if we're actually waiting or if we're just afraid to move forward. And the other is remember God's goodness. And we listed off all those things, salvation, glory. But not just that. Those times of those miscarriages that I talked about, I'm not going to go into the whole story, but some of you know Connie and Eric Helland. They were going through the same thing. He was not a Christian. He was not a believer. And God used that time for us to minister to them and to go through that together. And he gave his life to Christ, and he's a Christian to this day. There's more things that came out of that. But I can even look back at the difficult times and waiting on God and not knowing what the answer is and realize the opportunities that I had in the midst of that waiting. So remember God's goodness through it. And then follow, don't lead. Follow, don't lead. You know, sometimes I was talking about Jeff driving the car and we get impatient and we want to pass him. Sometimes what happens is there's this sweet-looking Porsche, whatever car it is you like if you're into cars, and it passes. And you're like, man, that Porsche looks sweet. I'm not following Jeff anymore. He's got an old beater car. I'm going to follow that Porsche. Now, that sounds silly, but we do that in our life, don't we? We're like, I'm not following God. I'm going to follow this. But nope, that person in the Porsche doesn't even know me, let alone know where I desire to go or where I'm trying to go. So we make a lot of foolish moves in our life by not waiting. So follow, don't lead. I just want to finish by suggesting something to you all. What if we all did this together? What if all of us really got in line following the lead car? We're following Jesus. It would be like a motorcade. All right, I'm just going with this car thing. You know, when you see a motorcade, when there's an important person coming and they stop, you know, everybody pulls off to the side, right? And there's this line of cars following. And people pause, and usually, you know, I do. I pause, and I'm like, who's that? Who is it they're following? What's so important that everybody's just in line following this person, following their lead? And we can do that. You know, I'm always trying to figure out, how do we evangelize in this day? How do we share people about Jesus? Everybody's got their preconceived ideas of what a Christian is, and it's not good most of the time. So how do I do it? Well, we can do it. We can do it by walking out of here together and saying, we're going to follow the lead car. And when we have to wait, we're going to wait. And when it's time to go, we're going to go. And it's going to be Jesus. And we're going to have a motorcade. And people are going to pause. And they're going to look. And they're going to say, who is it in the lead car? And then we just have to say, it's Jesus. All you have to do is follow. And when he stops, we stop. When he goes, he goes. And man, things go smooth. Everybody else gets off the side of the road and watches. So I encourage you to wait on God and enjoy it.